Welcome to my house, Waterbearers. I'm Akdayud. What I want to do here is basically just kind of help put everyone at ease with what's going on when you have an understanding of some of the things that are taking place. It's easier to relax the mind and not be so anxious or stressed. The chart that I have up is a chart that we all fall under this karma, this human karma. And this is ultimately what one would consider the horoscope of man or humanity, Adam. Aries ascendant, therefore, the will of man, free will to choose, to make that choice. Ultimately, man chose to want to be like God and have authority over other men. And this became the fall. Now, astrologically, we currently have Saturn moving through the 10th house. This is its own sign. This is why we see what we see going on. Saturn is the planet that is responsible for restriction, delay, denial. It represents authority figures, elders. It's in the 10th house. Now, the natural 10th house is occupation, government, status. It basically represents the public, everything that's outside of yourself, recognition. So, this is what we all recognize, the restrictions that we're now putting on ourselves, wanting others to restrict themselves, self-isolation. The sun, today is the equinox, so we're at the head of the Western year. I'll say the Western year. This is what we call the Vernal Equinox, spring. It starts today, March 19th. The sun is actually in the sign of Pisces. So it's Pisces is the natural 12th house. It's the house of isolation. The 12th house is also associated with jails. It's associated with hospitals. So you can see where quarantining oneself and distancing yourself, isolating yourself from the public comes under this Saturn energy that we're putting on, or you're putting on yourself as well. And it may seem as though it's coming through government because we all feel that we need government, someone, some authority to tell us how to live our life. So this is the restriction of Saturn that's occupying us all due to the things that are going on now. The fact that Mercury is in the 11th house of network circles. This has to do with mass media, social media, the hysteria that we have basically coming from that. It's not because we have local awareness, because it's blowing up around us locally, but because the mass media and social media has made it so obvious to us. This is symbolized. We all have Mercury right now transiting through the sign of Aquarius, which represents social circles. And Mercury naturally rules the third house of efforts, motivations, short travel, freedom of expression. So Mercury ruling that house, and also the sixth house, the natural sixth house of health, illness, disease, conflicts, enemies. So we can see how all of this is being brought up at this time through this natural horoscope that all of us deal with at the human level, the human experience. We each have a personal horoscope that provides a personal experience. But as we see, this is ultimately a human experience that we're all going through. Jupiter is going to be conjunct Mars again. Jupiter is in the natural ninth house of ideologies. So there's an explosion along with Mars being there, passionate about the things that we believe in. And right now, we all believe that there is a virus that we need to be afraid of, that we need to isolate ourselves from. Again, Venus, our happiness, our pleasure in the first house, but this is also right now at this time that we're all dealing with this in the nakshatra of Baharani, which is beginnings that come from endings. So this is going to bring about a beginning in relationships, because Venus ultimately, this also, Venus is the indicator of the seventh house. So seventh house, as much as it's partnerships, it's politics. So we will ultimately see a change in politics throughout this time. Now we're in the vernal equinox. This is the beginning of the solar new year as we celebrate it here in the West. Traditionally, through the Hebrew, the head of the year begins at the autumnal equinox, because it's believed that the day or the year begin in the night. When everything was created, it was created first in the darkness and come out of the darkness. So the dark part of the day is the part that starts the day. So sunset is when the day begins and ends for the traditional Hebrew tradition. So, but in the West, we begin the new year, the solar new year, at the equinox. This is the first month of the year. And so the vernal equinox is also a turning point. So this is a turning point for all of humanity right now. This energy coming in, the government we have on ourselves, the fact that Saturn is putting an aspect for the next 2.5 years on the 12th house of isolation, of spirituality, of charity. From the 10th house, it will also aspect the 4th house of happiness, contentment, fixed assets, homeland. It's our comfort. And the 7th house of partnerships, relationships. This is foreign settlements. This has to do with court and just anyone who is outside of yourself. So again, this fear that we have to worry about an invisible enemy makes everyone who is not ourself a potential enemy. So Saturn putting an aspect on the 12th house also signifies um, secret enemies, the enemies that you can't see. Jupiter naturally rules this house through the sign of Pisces, and therefore part of that represents our secret enemy comes from that which we believe. So if we believe we have something to fear, then there is. It is our faith that can both save us or destroy us, is ultimately what you can take from that understanding. So the fact that we have this Mars conjunct Jupiter, this energy, just fire, ambition, over the ideologies, the beliefs that we currently have right now, our higher knowledge, the things that we're all putting our energy into, the the hope, the optimism, the faith that we have as to whether or not we are going to be able to get rid of this, or if it's going to be something that is going to, many people believe or are starting to think that this could possibly be end times situations. For the next 5 years, Saturn is moving through its own signs. So there is going to be quite a lot of karma brought out. It's also important to note that right now, all of the planets are hemmed in between Rahu and Ketu. This is the Kala Sarpa Yoga, or Kali Sarpa Yoga, and this is basically a time serpent yoga. And this is where a lot of our human karma is going to be poured out on us. The cause and effect for what we've been doing to one another. And with this Mars conjunct Jupiter, our teachers, the people who have been teaching us a certain way, they will see a blowback from a lot of what's going to come out of this turning point as we come into the solstice of this year, where we have a solar eclipse happening. So again, 2020 is a big year. It is a realignment year, a resurrection year, where things are being returned to us. Whether or not we choose to realign, or if we just want to keep trying to control others, again, the will of man is not in alignment with the will of the universe, the goddess God, and the output of what it is man is trying to control when it's really God. And though we choose and have the free will, we have to just let one another be. This, for each of us, is our own test of faith, is to see how we are all connected. We are all connected through the horoscope of humanity. We have this shared experience that we're all coming to now. So where do we go from here? Do we find a balance, a resolution, or do we then go to war with one another? Do we force our beliefs on everyone else? Do we force people to vaccinate because we believe that a vaccination is going to be the only thing that is going to keep us safe? So we forcefully, through the government, issue mandatory vaccines, which we don't know if they will ever truly work until a year later, 2 years later, until we see it resurface. So again, do we enforce or do we trust divine order? That really is what we all have to come under and realize and recognize that this is part of a divine will that is outside of your personal will. And either you're going to be able to adjust and move with it, move with the energy of the universe, or you will be destroyed and swept up and swept away in this process of transformation that's coming through. That's where we're at. We're at a point of realignment where things are being purged out. And it begins here. As we go into this year, we have major things that'll be happening in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn representing the goals of humanity. So whether they are going to be spiritual, physical, materialistic, it's whether they're you decide to combine them both and make that the pursuit of humanity, or is it going to be the divine union that the creator ultimately wanted between him, herself, and us, humanity, to share that commonality where in that image where we are co-creators. So that's really what I wanted to say. I hope we can find some peace in this time as Mercury begins to come out of shadow and starts to gain some speed. It's still going to be in the sign of Aquarius, so a lot of us are going to be thinking about what's going on in the world. A lot of that will have our mind occupied and our attention. What we must understand is that's why it is Mercury that rules the sixth house of disease and illness, because it is the things that you think about that make you sick and make you ill. So if you're worried, stressed, and have anxiety over it, you're only lowering your immune system to become susceptible to even a cold, which we all become susceptible to at one time or another, but just out of fear, we begin to even worry about a cold and then passing it on to other people and all of it. So we do need to have faith that everything is ordained as it should be. We collectively share an experience, a human experience, whether or not we have a limited amount of time here. If the will of humanity is to say that man is God over that which is all pervading, then so be it. Man will not supersede that which is infinite. So we can continue to be godlike and physically kill one another and take the physical life from each one of us in our own earthly godhood, in our represented in our own, or we can realize that we are sons of the goddess, therefore brothers in one and to one another, equal to one another, and that we should not take the lives of one another, that we should want each other to grow and prosper. That is the lesson of humanity. We can't do that for all of humanity. The fact that humanity wanted to become like God, the individual man cannot be when every other man is also. There becomes that conflict of interest, therefore creating death for one or the other. The ego must set in order for life to also continue. So this is my lesson as we come into this new year. I hope you take this. A lot of this much comes from just paying attention and observing what's going on out there. This really is the human condition, why we start the horoscope with Aries, but this is the material world. So Aries is the first house, Taurus is the second. The spiritual man, Aries is the first house, Pisces is the second. Reverse the wheel, becomes spiritual. It joins in the seventh house. The physical world and the spiritual world merge in union in the Virgin, the seventh house. So I'm going to close this video here. I wish you peace and health, well-being, security, strength. I wish you wellness as this year comes. To all those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, glory is upon us. Okay? Thanks.